Not many people know that it was a Frenchman and not an American or a Russian who prevented global nuclear war. At the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, one man's calculations and threats made all the difference and prevented the outbreak of the end of the world. Today we will learn who it was and who saved the world from nuclear war. This is Knowledge Voyage. In 1963, the world stood on the verge of nuclear annihilation. The Soviet Union had secretly placed nuclear missiles on Cuba, placing most of the US population within range of atomic destruction. When the US found out, it triggered arguably the most dangerous moment of the Cold War. It placed John F. Kennedy against Nikita Khrushchev. Both men had grounds for escalation. Kennedy had been embarrassed over Cuba before, when a CIA-sponsored attempt to overthrow Castro at the Bay of Pigs failed in calamity. He would need to show strength this time. Khrushchev was also under pressure, as he needed to show he was the rightful heir to strongman Stalin, and his domestic agenda was failing. He had to show strength in case hardliners in Moscow deposed him for being too soft. Both men were not willing to budge, and as American ships placed a blockade around Cuba, Soviet ships on their way to Cuba stated they would ignore any blockade. Most people know the conventional history. That is, at the last minute, Khrushchev backed down and the Americans and Soviets came to an arrangement to remove missiles. But what most people do not know is that it was not Kennedy and not Khrushchev, nor any American or Russian who stopped the nuclear war. The real man who prevented nuclear war was French President Charles de Gaulle. De Gaulle was the father of post-war France, a decorated World War I veteran and leader of the Free French in exile during World War II. He felt France still had a major role to play in world affairs, unlike many other European countries who took a back seat after World War II. De Gaulle had urged France to develop nukes, and also demanded France retain control over their use, instead of allowing NATO and the US to have the final say. He had also become aware of a secret deal the Americans and Soviets are said to have reached. Both the Americans and Soviets wanted to keep their own homelands safe. In the event of nuclear war, there was a gentleman's secret agreement. The Soviets and Americans would use nukes, but only in Europe. They would spare each other's countries and use nukes only as they fought to control the European continent. De Gaulle heard about this, famously stating that no American president would ever trade Chicago for Paris. So he made it clear. If France was attacked by the Soviets with nukes, France would attack the Soviet Union. And if the Soviet Union was nuked by France, there would be no more point in restraint, so the Soviets would nuke America. De Gaulle's stance completely changed the Cold War calculations. If the Americans and Soviets could have had a, quote, limited nuclear war contained only in Europe but sparing their own countries, history may have been different. This would have made their calculations about using nukes simpler. But de Gaulle changed that. His vow to put France first and ignore any alleged American-Soviet secret pact changed the calculus. The Cuban Missile Crisis eventually ended in a sigh of relief. And there were other near misses in the rest of the Cold War, such as the Able Archer incident, which we also have a video on. But had it not been for de Gaulle, maybe nuclear war would have broken out, and the world as we know it would have come to an end.